The Santa Claus 2 arrived 8 years after the first entry to tell the story of Tim Allen's incarnation of Father Christmas finding himself a Mrs. Claus. There's also a robot Santa who goes all dictator on the elves. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Oh, a battle of wits. It's a shame you're unarmed.
This is a movie podcast. We are working our way through the Santa Claus series. This is going to be the Santa Claus 2, which came out in 2002. Just a little 8-year gap between the first and second movie.
Barely even noticeable.
So, yes, that is what we're going to talk about. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we do go into spoilers. But yes, so obviously we talked about the Santa Claus last time, a film that we'd both seen growing up, but I have not seen this one before. This was a first time watch for me, a sequel.
And I certainly have seen it before, but I think some scenes from other movies have wormed their way into my memory, because I remember there being a lot more to this movie.
I'll be honest, I didn't really know what this movie was going to be, except for that I read that it was, something to do with finding Mrs. Claus. That was the only tidbit I got going in of what it was. I was not expecting duplicate dictator Santa, which we'll get into in good time.
I feel like A and B just go right together. How can you tell one story without the other?
I know, they fit together so perfectly.
Yeah.
So naturally with this sort of time jump, and the fact that they actually do bring the vast majority of the cast back, which I wasn't expecting. I was pretty sure Judge Reinhold was done with acting by this point, but here he is.
I mean, I thought, obviously you got to have Tim Allen back, but besides that, I didn't think anybody, especially after 8 years, was particularly required to return.
What's wild is I actually clicked on the third movie to see if most people were back for that as well, and it looks like they are.
I mean,
so,
if Disney was giving them the money, I'm sure they weren't turning it down.
Absolutely. Including the new addition to this movie is back for the next one as well. So we'll get into all that. But yeah, obviously that means that his son has grown quite a bit. And that's the sort of role that I would expect might have been recast, because maybe they thought, oh, this kid turned into a shit teenage actor, so we'll get another teenager to do it. But no, it's him. It's the same guy.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that was the part that, because, it was such a young age starting out to what he is now. He hit puberty. He looks completely different. If you told me it was a different actor, I would have believed you 100%. But nah, same guy. So good on him, I guess.
Yeah. So you've got that. The only role that I can tell was recast at a glimpse is basically the Judy, whoever the elf is.
Judy?
The elf that makes the cocoa is, and that's just purely because the elves aren't supposed to age, so they couldn't. Literally, the girl from the first movie is 15 by the time this came out.
You say that, but now that, because I didn't remember her name from the first movie until you said it, the name of the elf in this movie is Abby.
Oh, was it?
Yes. So okay. I guess it's just her twin sister who lives at the South Pole.
But she's clearly the same role in the sense that she's got the same attitude. She makes the cocoa. It's the same character.
Yeah.
Just with a different name. But fair enough. So technically not a recast, but it's a recast. Let's call it what it is.
It's absolutely.
So, but other than that, everyone's back. There's a new little sister character who's 7, which makes sense. She wasn't in the first movie, so she's at that age. The ex-wife's back. Judge Reinhold's back. We have the head elf back, which is funny because in the first movie, he's obviously, I think he was 15, 16 when they made that movie. Now he's kind of turned into typical Hollywood, where he's a 24-year-old pretending to be a 16-year-old.
To be fair, he's a 24-year-old pretending to be a 16-year-old, pretending to be 900 years old. So
that's fair. Yes. So that's David Krumholtz playing that character. The main new addition is Elizabeth Mitchell, who it's actually weird to see her in a role from this time period because, I say this time period. Basically, I know her from Lost, right? She's she's from Lost. She's Juliet in Lost. and she showed up in that in like season 3, which was about 2006, 2007. So it's kind of weird. I was like, oh, she was in like a. It's not a bit. I mean, it's a big movie. It's a Disney release movie. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not a Hollywood big, but it's a culturally bigger movie.
So it was kind of surprising to see her in this, and so I was like, oh, okay. So we got her. She's the principal at Charlie the kid's school, which becomes part of the plot as we go on. There's a lot of smaller roles in here that are kind of notable though. So part of something that's set up early on is that Santa has like meetings with other like holiday characters and other sort of mythical beings that have like a place in modern culture. Art LaFleur is a character actor that I quite like, who plays the Tooth Fairy in this. But I know him from the Trancers movies, the Blob remake. He's in a lot of stuff. But he's in here. Aisha Tyler is here as Mother Nature.
Aisha Tyler's the only one that I feel like she came into the role and they were like, okay, we have to she has to be at least a little respected. Everyone else we could just like whatever, who cares? But she's the one that's treated with any sort of respect.
Yeah, and then less recognizable because you're not used to seeing him without the makeup. But Michael Dorn, who plays Worf on Star Trek, is he was Sandman. So he's got like one joke, but he's there.
Yeah. Also got Peter Boyle as Father Time. Strangely enough, the recast in the other direction where he's the same actor playing a different character.
Yeah, he was the boss at the company last movie, and now he's Father Time. And I guess they thought they'd get away with it because he's wearing this big beard now for the role.
I mean, I wouldn't have been able to tell if it wasn't for the fact of his voice being a little distinct. Yeah. That's about the only thing that gave it away.
Yeah, his voice instantly made me go, oh, that's Peter Boyle. That's weird that they brought him back in a different role. But hey, I'm not complaining. Whatever. It's basically a cameo. It's not like a proper role anyway.
And then, just also throwing out there's Cupid and Easter Bunny, played by Kevin Pollak and Jay Thomas, respectively.
Yeah. So yeah, most of those are basically cameos. Some get a little bit more time than others, but they're just kind of a fun little thing. The main gist of this movie is that it turns out there's a second clause in the contract. That second clause is that Santa needs to get away. I don't know why specifically it's like 8 years is when this time's about to run out.
Yeah.
They never really give me a good reason for that, but regardless, he has to get a Mrs. Claus by Christmas, which is 27 days away when they bring this up. And if he doesn't, he can't be Santa anymore. And he basically, it's an excuse for him to turn back into regular Tim Allen after a little bit because he starts desantifying.
Yeah, that was a weird part to me. Like, in my memory of this movie, I remember him like ever so slowly losing his Santa looks. Like, it took place over the course of the entire movie to the point where he's only looking like Tim Allen for maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 scenes. Nah, it's the flip. He's losing it for 2 or 3 scenes, and then he's just Tim Allen for most of the movie.
Which, it does, you can read that a little bit cynical, and it was just like, oh, Tim Allen didn't want to have to do the fat suit and the makeup and whatever the whole time.
See, you say that, and based off of like the trivia I saw for the last movie where he hated being in that stuff. It was torture for him because they weren't like properly ventilating or anything like that. But then you throw in the second plot where he is 100% caked to the bone with nothing but prosthetic and makeup.
Maybe that's why though he insisted on, I want to just be me for most of the main role, because I'm going to have to spend so much time doing this stupid second character, and more on that second character when we get into things a bit. But so yeah, the plot is him coming back home to deal with the fact that Charlie's getting into trouble because he's graffitiing the school, and he's getting threatened with suspensions and things like that. But he also has to find a wife, and not only does he have to find a woman, he has to convince her to marry him in a month, less than a month even. Yeah. So that is the main premise, and for some reason in his place, Bernard, and we get this new character called Curtis, who's one of the elves, who he's basically like his Q.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's here's the thing. They had at the very end of the last movie, they had a Q introduced. I think his name was literally like Quentin. Like, it started with a Q. And he was like, oh, we've souped up your sleigh with all this special stuff. But they were like, that guy wasn't available, so we're just going to go with Spencer Breslin.
Well, what do you mean? It's not that he wasn't available. He aged out the role considerably.
I mean, I guess if you want to say it like that. The fact that the head elf returned is the point that tells me that they could have just put whoever.
No, no, because the thing is he's already like he's still the height he was more or less in the last movie, right? He still looks kind of like him because he'd already went through puberty. You can't do that with the other kids. The other kids, much like Charlie the son, they all will look completely different. They'd be too tall.
Okay, I don't want to get too much into this because it is
like Bernard
no.
was always taller than the rest of them.
I get it, I understand, but I just want to point out one thing.
Okay.
Is that in preparation for this show, I watched the trailer for the Disney Plus series of Clauses, which is now set 30 years after the first film.
I feel like I know where this is going, and I'm just going to say
Bernard's still there, dude.
And he's like 45.
Admittedly, he is definitely 45.
Which, you know what? That's fine. They wanted to bring him back because he's a notable actor and whatever. But that doesn't affect this movie though. In this movie, the logic still works. The fact that they are doing that in 2022 is not this movie's fault.
Fair enough. I won't hold it against this movie, but I'm saying that from a creative perspective, the only thing stopping them from bringing back previous characters is their own limitations here. They easily could have done it.
For all we know, this kid that ended up being tall, he's like 6'5", he towered over Tim Allen and everyone else.
Why can't we have tall elves? I see no reason why.
So yes, but for some reason they think that the rest of the elves won't be okay with Santa being missing, so they have this plot to put him in his duplicating machine, which will make a toy duplicate, which is basically effectively it's a robot. It's like a robot Santa based on Tim Allen, and basically whilst Tim Allen's away in the real world dealing with stuff, this Santa gets a little too dictatorial and takes the rules and the job too seriously, and that's kind of where that plot goes. So that's kind of like a subplot throughout the movie.
Yeah, he's not able to make those little gimmies. He's not able to decide, like, well, we'll let it slide this time. He's like, nah, these are the rules, and the rules say every kid is naughty.
Yeah, so what I thought was weird about this subplot is just that in the first movie, Tim Allen, when he was becoming Santa, the North Pole was left without a Santa, and Bernard seemed to run the show quite happily without anyone, being that fussed about it. But for some reason, they feel the need to trick all the elves and lie to them that Santa's still here. I don't really understand why. But
I'm gonna go ahead and, because they said Santa was required back by Thanksgiving, I'm just gonna say that 1 month period between Thanksgiving and Christmas, Santa is absolutely crucial. And as we've established, it's only 27 days to Christmas, so we're in that period.
No, you're right. I hadn't considered that. You're right. He did come back in Thanksgiving in the first movie. So we're in that time period. Fair enough. I'll.
That being said, like you just brought up, they specifically say Bernard can handle it. They say that in this movie. They're like, Bernard can easily handle all this. He doesn't need to make a duplicate. But, plot requires it.
Yeah, plot needs it, so therefore it must be. So, yes. So at this juncture, we'll pause here in terms of describing anything, and I shall simply ask the question. David, what did you think of the Santa Claus 2?
This was an all-time classic, 10 out of 10. I see no flaws in this at all. I will watch this year-round, and at no point will it ever leave my screen. No, actually, in all honesty, like I said, I watched this not like intentionally a lot growing up, but it was just kind of something that always seemed to be on. Maybe it was just running on Disney Channel during Christmas time, or maybe someone had a DVD of it and it was, it's rated G, which that surprised me because nothing is rated G anymore.
There's nothing in the movie that I would say would make it a PG,
right.
So
yeah, fair, but like still nothing is rated G anymore. Everyone at least goes for that little bit of PG if they're going to hit the theatrical market. But yeah, no, for me, I think that I did have a bit of rose-tinted glasses thinking back on this, and watching it again now, it definitely isn't as great as I remember it. And great being a strong word already. I think my biggest describer of changing it is it's very fast. It is a very fast-paced movie where you don't get to slow down for anything.
There's definitely some leaps in character connections and like relationships that feel like they jump over a threshold very quickly. Yeah, there's quite a bit of that, and not just the romantic side. There's a couple of character relationships that feel like they just jump from point to point very quickly. I'm thinking Tim Allen and his son in the movie. Like there's like a weird, just very instantly we progress to this, then very instantly after one conversation we progress to that. It's just boom, boom, boom. Yeah. So it all just kind of feels like we're just rushing through that to service whatever the plot's supposed to be, which, you know, I think the movie's fine. Like, it did make me laugh a couple times. There's definitely some more kiddie stuff in this one versus the last one. They introduced this thing where some of the reindeer, like, kind of talk with, like, noises.
Yeah. As soon as that started, I was like, I had to remember that definitely wasn't a thing. Like the reindeer in the previous movie just kind of like nudged in a general direction.
Yeah. And it's funny because one of the moments that made me laugh is the moment where I think it's Comet gives Kevin, or Calvin rather.
Calvin. Yeah, Scott Calvin.
Gives Calvin like some side eye in a scene, and that actually kind of made me laugh because it was, but again, it was because it was quiet and it was like this, just like this look, and they've got this, you know, this puppet head doing the look, and I'm like, oh, it's a decent little. I mean, it's a very fake looking head in the sense that it doesn't look like a real animal, but it's a nice animatronic in that it's expressive. So I was like,
it's a Disney animatronic.
Yes.
Like it could very easily be cartoonized without changing much.
Although on that subject though, the effects for like the flying sleigh, but specifically kind of the dome of the North Pole, whenever there's anything in that kind of region, it looks pretty rough. Like the movie starts with like a plane flying over the North Pole, and all of those shots look terrible.
I mean, I was actually, at first I was a bit impressed because watching this with the one prior to it back to back, they never really expanded on that little North Pole village at all. They left it pretty much just, they were in the workshop and then you didn't see anything else. This one, they said like, no, we showed in the snow globe, there's a whole little North Pole village, and they have a full set built for the entire of like the center of town. But as soon as you get out to like, they're under an ice dome, pretty much as you described. That's where the set stops and the CGI starts, and it's a little bit rough looking in places.
Yeah, honestly, I described the whole movie as looking kind of cheap. It kind of looks like a Hallmark movie at points. Like, see when it's like just the actors in the real world and like we're doing the romance stuff or whatever. I'm like, other than the fact that the actors are maybe a little bigger than what you'd get in those movies, it still kind of has that kind of feel and tone to it a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think it's last movie there was such this big thing of like, oh, we have to show, you know, him going down the chimney and the chimney changing and everything like that. This movie, all of the magic stuff, and they specifically put in a reason why there isn't a lot of magic stuff, but all the magic stuff they do have seems to be off screen. Like they do as much as they can, like, oh hey, some magic thing just happened over there. And now we'll cut over to it once it's already done.
Which is kind of weird because it doesn't really feel like it needs to, like, it's a Disney sequel. It feels like it, and it was released in theaters, so you'd think it wouldn't be a lower budget than the first one was, but
I don't know.
It does feel like less of a production. It feels a bit cheaper than the first one did for whatever reason. The third one may have been direct to video. I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know. We will look that up next time.
Yeah, but this one did come out in theaters, and it definitely just has a cheaper feel to it all the time, which isn't a big deal necessarily, but it kind of stuck out to me as feeling a little bit just, you know, TV channel-esque at its quality at times. Because even the big impressive set of the North Pole, it does look like a TV set. You know, it doesn't look like a tactile real thing. So, I
mean, just looking it up now, it looks like the first movie had a budget of $22 million, and the second movie, the one we're doing now, had a budget of $65 million. But you got to keep in mind 8 years of inflation in there. I don't know what that comes. It's definitely not even. It definitely had a bigger budget the second time around, but I can't tell you where it went. Probably just Tim Allen's entirely new contract.
I have to imagine the cast, Tim Allen in particular, but the cast that all had to come back, they all get to ask for more money in the second time, and I think that's maybe where a lot of the budget got. It's it's a bit odd. It's a bit odd why it feels so cheap in comparison, and maybe it's just like a time period thing where there was a certain look that movies in the 2000s had that if you weren't going for a specific style, they just looked naturally a bit cheaper.
But I mean, I also think that it's just a thing of, like you said, this movie, it strews a little bit younger. I think that it doesn't have to worry about impressing the parents as much. Like, oh, you and your kid are going to watch this. This movie is far more just, you can let your kid watch this. Yeah. And the kids aren't going to care if it's, wow, the ice dome looks so real. They're going to be focused on, Chet the reindeer, funny fart noises.
Oh, there'd be farts. So, like, I would say the quality is overall a bit worse than the first one. I would say that it's still relatively inoffensive and, nice enough. There's a couple of things, like, it does feel like Scott Calvin does kind of turn back into just being Scott Calvin a couple of times early on, particularly when he's dealing with the principal at first, when he's like there to talk to her about his son being in trouble. He has kind of this like, some of your immature like responses are sort of starting to creep back out here, and then it just kind of goes away after a few scenes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like the principal meeting scene is the only scene where that really happens. Everywhere else, he's either extremely kind and caring, bringing on the Santa thing, or he's, I mean, not to spoil too much, but when they get into him dating, he's very heartfelt and romantic, as best as he can be, at least. That scene's the only one that really sticks out to me is like, no, that's the sarcastic, quippy one that was 95% of the last movie. Yeah,
it's almost like Tim Allen's like, I need to get some of me in here. I need a little bit of Tim Allen in this movie. Because there's not a lot of it, because like the whole idea is that he's been Santa for 8 years, and he's this kind, compassionate man who's,
I mean, they literally say that the elves and a bunch of kids think he is the best Santa to ever exist. So
I think they say kids are 85% happier since he became Santa, which is... That's a hell of an approval rate.
I mean, if you've got the metric, use it when you can.
Yeah. So, I don't know what else to say without getting into the plot and talking about the scenes.
I mean, if we're just talking about overall, without getting too much into spoilers, it is a kid's film more so than the first one. Whereas the first one I felt had a message that was very heartfelt in a family sense. This one is, I couldn't really tell you what the message is at the end of it. It doesn't really seem to, it's still a good, like, heartwarming kind of Christmas movie, but it doesn't come at you with like a central theme or a central message to it. It's just kind of we threw together all the things that feel good and put it into
I think plot. You could have argued that there could be an interesting arc and like Scott's like need for love and companionship, that he's got this perfect job and he's got this happy existence in the North Pole and he does all these things, but he's kind of empty because he doesn't have someone to share it with. But the movie never actually gives us the impression that he's actually feeling lonely before he's told he needs to find a wife. He doesn't seem to give a shit. He's just kind of like...
And even then, I don't think he is lonely, because they go through the entire thing of showing how much he gets out of just having friendships with all the elves up in the North Pole. Like, he is completely fulfilled. He's like, nah, things are great. It's only once he's legally contracted to get a wife, he's like, all right, well, guess I'll do it.
Yeah, and he's not
do wonder...
I was going to say, he's not really excited about the prospect either. It's not until he obviously eventually falls for the one who's the obvious candidate that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I do wonder, though, back when the contract of the Santa Claus was first made, I wonder if they had in mind, like, divorce and stuff like that. Like, I wonder if theoretically they could pull a thing where it's like he just marries his ex-wife again for, like, 3 days and then is able to call it.
Well, it also raises another question. What happened to the wife of the previous Santa?
Oh, she died simultaneously. That's part of the contract.
Oh, is it? She just disappeared.
If the one Santa dies, the second one goes immediately.
Maybe they should.
And it's not like Obi-Waning. It's not like where they just disappear. Like, it's gory, man. It's horrible up there.
Because realistically, if the rule was the Santa had to have a Mrs. Claus, Then when Tim Allen first went to the North Pole in the last bit, there should have been like a Mrs. Claus packing her bags and be like, well, I guess I'm done here.
There's just a council of widowed Mrs. Clauses up at the North Pole. All of them just ruling over the North Pole from behind the scenes. That would be an interesting plot.
Oh yeah, it'd be lovely. All right, let's say spoilers then, so we can just talk about anything in the movie and sort of work through the various elements of it.
All right, spoilers. The Tooth Fairy's a lot bigger than you think he would be.
He also hates the name of the Tooth Fairy, and he's concerned about his masculinity. He's a nice enough guy, but he's concerned about his image. And what does he end up calling himself?
He went through like 3 different names of like the plaque something or another. But the big one,
Mollernator.
The Mollernator. Yep.
The Mollernator. Yeah. Took me a second to even get that, to be honest. 'Cause I thought he said Molinator. Molinator.
I mean, if you look on closed captioning, it is Molinator. It's only once you say it out loud that you're like, oh, Mollern. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's like an opening where this plane's flying over, and this dome sort of like hides the North Pole. Right. Not. I mean, I don't mean the Arctic itself, but it hides their village.
Right.
The Christmassy North Pole, and they they do a whole thing where they have to be quiet, and there's the one kid who starts playing the song on the Santa toy. So there's it's a whole thing.
It's a whole like military style DEF CON procedure.
Yeah. Do you know what's weird about this though is that it was amusing enough, but all I could think was, as I was watching, I was like, oh, they're setting all this up because someone finding the North Pole is going to be a part of the plot. Like, they're going to have to deal with the fact that someone's looking for the North Pole later, and it never ever comes up again.
I guess I didn't even consider that being a thing because I knew that wasn't part of the plot.
True.
I knew that it wasn't even going to be a thing where it was just, we're just doing this because it's a fun little intro.
It's just it's storytelling 101. You show the successful we've hidden from like outsiders successfully here, so that later when someone does kind of trick them or get through and discover it, like that could be the setup of a whole plot of the movie if that's what you're going to do. Like, oh, the North Pole's been discovered by some explorer and he wants to expose it to the world.
I mean, I guess if you're looking for setup payoff, the setup in this movie was that Curtis is kind of a screw up. He's kind of someone who doesn't succeed in the things that he needs to do. And that's what they were setting up with the scene. But yeah, they probably could have done it in a different way besides introducing this whole thing of, no, people can find them.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't magically protected. It's literally just they can hear them.
Yeah. So, yeah, he finds out about this wife clause. He also finds out that Charlie is in trouble. And we see Charlie. That was the other thing that I thought the movie was going to do more with, actually, is they introduced Charlie has like a girlfriend or a love interest.
Yeah, Danielle.
And they almost kiss in this scene where they're together, and it's right before he rappels down, or rappels down, sorry, into the basketball court in the school, so he can graffiti on the wall, up high in the wall. I was like, okay, this is kind of neat. But I was like, so you're going to do a thing where he almost kisses this girl for the first time, and something interrupts it. Okay, you're going to pay that off later, right? you're gonna have him kiss her later.
The first 20 minutes of this script were from a different draft, and they just couldn't part with it. They loved it too much.
She's only in one other scene. She's in one scene later on when they're throwing snowballs at the principal's house, and that's it. You never see her again.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too much into it, but the Charlie plot is definitely the biggest, like, loser in terms of, I'm sure it was bigger at some point and the rewrites just trimmed it until finally we got to the point where it's like Charlie's plot only exists to further the love interest plot with the principal.
But I thought they were going to do a mirroring thing though, because there's a point where it's after Tim Allen has the first date, or he has like a blind date with a woman, and he comes to talk to Charlie. And Charlie kind of opens up he kind of likes a girl, and he's thinking about kissing her. And I was like, oh, okay, so we're going to do some like parallels later when they both like man up and like get brave enough to kiss their love interests. Right. But you never see the girl again. You
see her one other time. And even in that scene, she may as well have just been a normal friend. But yeah, no, that scene was literally just, hey, Dad, I'm going through some weird changes right now, and I need some help understanding them. And then Tim Allen's just like, good luck. Bye.
Dad, what's a boner and why do I keep getting it?
Well, son, shake your snow globe, and that's all the advice I have to give.
That's literally what he says. He says, "You're the snow globe you got from Bernard in the last movie,
Yeah.
remember?"
He just distracts. He's like, oh, yeah, that thing. Anyway, I gotta... Bye now.
I don't have advice for you. What are you talking about?
I work with a bunch of elves. I've had to turn off every bit of my testosterone.
Oh, yeah.
In order to make that work.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I want to talk about. So obviously, he rides Comet back just on his own, like he's a horse, right? He rides Comet, who flies through the sky back to civilization to deal with the principal thing. And of course, the second you're introduced to the principal, who's like not wanting to spend money on Christmas decorations for the school, which also I feel like never pays off, and that you never see her like change her mind on that and like decorate the school. Again, there's so many things at the start of this movie that felt like they were setting up for payoff later, and they never did.
No, the payoff was that she doesn't like Christmas for some reason, and then we get that later on, kinda, sorta, not really, but
oh god, I so many things. It's just simple script writing rules.
Yeah, I guess that did pop out to me when I was watching it. I was like, oh, I know that this isn't going to be a thing, but it is weird how they're bringing it up now. Like it's more so for character than it is plot.
Yes.
Like it's pulling out Chekhov's gun to show you that a character isn't afraid to have a gun. Not that the gun is ever going to be used, it's just to further the character.
This movie has like a whole room, like a pit full of Chekhov guns that never get picked up.
Yeah.
It's baffling. Anyway.
But they looked really good.
So the second, of course, we're in spoilers now. So the second that we introduce to her, it's like, okay, she's obviously going to be the Mrs. Claus. She's obviously the love interest because we're spending time on her. She's kind of confrontational with Tim Allen.
She's literally the only female who has been introduced in this movie.
Unless his ex-wife's going to dump Judge Reinhold, which is actually the thing I wanted to talk about just now, is the absurd chemistry and relationship that now exists between Calvin and his ex-wife and Judge Reinhold, where obviously in the first movie they were kind of the antagonist. Well, maybe antagonist is a strong word, but they didn't believe him. They thought he was, they were this plot obstacle for him that he had to overcome.
They were antagonists in that they were introducing the conflict that he had to go through.
Whereas now they're on his side. They're accepting of what he is, and when he arrives, like he hugs both of them. Even Judge Reinhold gets in and goes, "Oh, big guy, give me a hug." And they're cracking all these little jokes, and there's a little bit of like Judge Reinhold doing a little bit of therapy talk and Tim Allen making fun of it, but for the most part, it's just like they're all happy. Where it really turns into something, so they're all happy together. They're making small talk. They're talking about life. There's North Pole. He has to get married. All that, and they're like, maybe I can introduce you with someone. Blah 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 blah. And like the ex-wife makes a joke about but you have to like marry someone in 27 days. It took you 3 years to propose to me. How the hell are you going to do this in 27 days? But there's just all these little things where like Judge Reinhold's really into it. And there's a scene where just before he goes on his blind date with someone that his ex-wife set him up with, he's wearing, because he's lost a lot of weight quickly because he's like transforming back into Tim Allen. He's not quite there yet, but he's lost a lot of weight. He's wearing one of Judge Reinhold's tops, one of his sweaters that look kind of, I don't know what to call it, but whatever. It looks.
It's garish. It's very eyesore.
It's something that your grandfather might fall asleep wearing on a Christmas in like the 90s or something. Like that's kind of what it looks like. Anyway, so like Judge Reinhold just says something. He just comes out with when Tim Allen says he's not really sure about the sweater. He's like, "No, you look hot, honey. Doesn't it look hot?" And I'm like, "You're asking your wife, which is his ex-wife, if he looks hot in this."
See, I like that scene because like I understand where you're coming from with it. Now that's a weird like point to bring up, but the fact that it was all set up for the joke of him be like, "No, that's what it looks great. Like it's hot," and she makes some sort of remark of just like, "Well, it's certainly it's on the inside that what counts," and then like Neil recognizes it. He's like, "I thought you liked that sweater." And she's like, "We'll talk about it," and they just move on. Like,
yeah.
I love that moment. That moment was perfect for me because it's like, no, let's call out the sweater thing a little bit.
I mean, I think it's so weird that is he delusional enough to actually think that these sweaters are hot, that they're actually attractive to the opposite sex.
I mean, there is something to being confident enough to think you can pull that off, but that's about all I got.
Yeah, I mean they definitely have diminished roles because after this scene they basically have the tooth pulling scene later, and that's kind of it, I think.
Yeah, they're much smaller here. But then again, I don't think they have any plot. Like, no matter which plot they go with, whether it's Charlie, the romance plot, the second Santa plot, there's no plot where they could take a bigger role.
No,
they're just here for the sake of. Now, Charlie still has to technically be living with people down here, so may as well get these characters back.
Yeah, I'm not even complaining or critiquing it. I'm just kind of observing that there's definitely a lot less of them in this movie. Yeah, because later on, Judge Reinhold's very excited to try and help. Because later on in the movie, when they have to find a way to get back to the North Pole, there's a mechanic set up that you've only got so much magic left, Santa. This watch will tell you you've got 10 units of magic left.
Yeah,
and he ends
10
up
magics of magic, whatever they would be.
He ends up using them all to impress Carol, the principal character.
Right.
And because of that, he can't go back. But he's got Comet, but Comet's gotten fat on candy, so.
I mean, this is we can't overstate. This is literally the beginning of the third act. Like, we're skipping most of the movie.
I'm just explaining this Tooth Fairy scene because I want to just wrap up the Judge Reinhold and ex-wife stuff, which is basically, oh wait, we know the Tooth Fairy. If Tim Allen can pull a tooth out, he can lure the Tooth Fairy in. That's how you call the Tooth Fairy. Yeah. So they're trying to like pull his tooth out in a variety of silly ways, and Judge Reinhold's like, no, you tie a toaster to it and you throw the toaster down the stairs. This is what we used to do as kids for extra cash. Like,
yeah. Honestly, that felt like that wasn't even Neil at that point because he was so enthusiastic about it. He was like, "Yeah, let's do this."
He was a cartoon character in this scene. They did not resemble who he was in the first movie at all.
And as soon as he says those words of "get some extra cash," he doesn't he's not on screen again. He doesn't say another word. He is done. He's gone.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, and then the punchline is the little girl, the little sister character comes out and says, "Mom, I lost another tooth." And it's like, excellent,
perfect. Don't have to do this anymore.
It's a natural tooth loss. So, yeah, and that's basically them. That's the couple gone out of the movie pretty much. They have nothing left to do. So yeah, we'll just write them out.
So just going back to the beginning of the movie real quick, the introduction scenes when we're going through the North Pole village, we're introduced to, I think, 3 major components. I guess 4, but we already talked about the one. 3 major components being Curtis the elf and how he is the keeper of the rules for Santa. And the entire plot revolves around the fact that for literally 8 years, Curtis just forgot to mention that there was a Mrs. Claus, or he overlooked it at the very least, which I don't want to get too heavy in the lore of this, but it's kind of seemingly established that like Santa is still mortal. He still ages at like a regular rate and he has to be regularly replaced. And because of that, have they not had at least like 300 Santas over his 900-year lifespan? Have they never gotten a Santa to live long enough to get to the Mrs. Claus?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a very good question. I mean, I could buy if you say that he's aging slower now that he's Santa Claus or something.
That's fair. It's some magic. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. But yeah, I don't have. I really don't.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is that prior to this, every single Santa who's been brought in has already been married, and they've brought a Mrs. Claus with them.
Yeah,
that's about the only thing I could think of.
And Calvin just happens to have like been divorced when he's brought in. So yeah, we have to talk about his first big blind date that he has. He's set
sorry, I'm still at the beginning of the movie though.
Oh, sure. What else should I talk about?
Yeah, no. They give one scene at the very beginning, and then it comes back in the third act. Chet the reindeer.
Yes, chat.
I mean,
reindeer.
anything,
Excuse me, reindeer in training.
Right. No, but see, he is still of the species reindeer,
Yes.
so I'm going to go ahead and say he's a reindeer. If there is anything in this movie that makes it feel targeted for kids instead of adults, rather than kids and adults, it's Chet. And he's barely in the movie, but he brings down that age rating so far, so fast.
Yeah, he's a reindeer who keeps crashing and can't fly anywhere properly.
And you
yells.
say that the reindeers are all making sort of like noises. This one is making, I don't know, it's baby babble is the best way I could put it.
It's also kind of screaming as well at times. There's like a sort of scream that's sort of interspersed in it as well. Yeah.
He's constantly making like a bugle noise. He's like, da, 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 da. It's like, okay, chat, we can like lower your screen time down to 1.5 minutes. I'd be cool with that.
So you got that. Anything else from this opening you want to talk about?
Let me just the football scene when he shows
I forgot about this.
He shows how he's going around the North Pole and he's saying to all the elves like, "Oh, you're doing a great job, such a cool thing." And the elves prank him by dumping tinsel all over him, and he's like, "Well, guys, I could come up there and kick your asses." He doesn't say it like that, but he may as well have. Or we could go play some football. And it's just to show how he's comrades with the elves. He's very playful. He's having fun with them. They're all his friends. And the only reason I bring it up is because it comes back in a very different way about a third more into the movie. And just wanted to bring that up.
Sure. I mean, I don't have too much to say about like the early scenes, other than the fact that he just dismisses that Charlie's getting into trouble and just, you promise you won't do it again, right? Yeah, I promise that.
I mean, you say he dismisses. He is very distraught to find out that Charlie's on the naughty list. Like he is on the list.
But I'm talking about when he's actually in the parent teacher meeting with the principal, and like the principal clearly like wants to suspend him, sees this as like a serious thing that's recurring, and Tim Allen just goes, "Aye, but you're, like, obviously I'm mad about this," and he knows he's done a wrong thing. You promise not to do it again. And he's like, "Yep, done. We can leave."
Yeah, fair enough.
I just parented.
Yeah, I would put that more to, out of the two things that he's down here for, one being Charlie, the other being him having to get married, one of those things is on a time limit. And I feel like he kind of just wants to wrap up the one thing as quickly as possible to get to the other thing.
Okay. It felt very in character for his character from the first movie, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
To have this attitude, which is, I guess, why it kind of stuck out, because it's the only time that he acts like his first movie self in this.
Yeah.
So,
and it is worth pointing out, I guess, that all the times that Charlie is shown vandalizing things, because it does continue to happen, it's always at the expense of this principal.
Yes.
Like, nobody likes this principal character. And she's very anti-fun and Christmas.
Which, I feel like this idea, which is set up with his graffiti at the start, I feel like that is kind of forgotten about as the movie goes on. Like, yeah, you've got him throwing snowballs at her house, like, halfway through the movie, and, like, that's, like, a point that comes up. But for the most part, I was expecting her to be more, based on the first couple of scenes with him and then her, I was expecting like her to be this Grinch of the town, or even this sort of Scrooge, right. Like the principal's the Scrooge that's making it miserable for all the teenagers, and that she was going to lighten up as the movie goes on. But literally, she spends like 2 minutes with Tim Allen when he's volunteering for a Saturday thing, and it's like, oh, like that like attitude has dropped completely, and she clearly is like, oh, like this guy's quite nice actually. I'm just going to act normal now, and it just goes away.
I mean, honestly, I would put it even earlier than that. During that first scene where Tim Allen's being all quippy during the parent-teacher conference, she quite literally explains, like, I'm not anti-Christmas. We literally just cannot afford it. Like, the money has to go towards teachers and school stuff rather than decoration.
I did get worried when that exchange was happening that the movie was going to have, like, no, you should always make time to spend money on the Christmas decorations because that's important. I was worried it was going to have like kind of a weird
take the saving Christmas route of things.
Yeah. So I'm glad it didn't do that. I'll say that much. I'm glad it didn't. So, there's like a little bit of him talking to the ex-wife and stuff, and like, talking about the needing to get married.
Yep. And this entire time, his desantification is going. He's getting slimmer. His beard's getting shorter.
Yeah. But so he goes on this blind date with a woman that the ex-wife knows, apparently. And she comes in, like, he's already sitting at the table. She comes in, and she's very loud and animated, whatever, is fine. But she loves Christmas. She's got a Christmas top on, and she's got a Christmas charm bracelet on. And he's like, oh, that's nice. And he's playing nice, and you kind of get that maybe he thinks she's a bit too much of a character, but he's being nice enough, or to play nice. And then she says, oh, like, I want to be a singer. I want to be a singer-songwriter. I can see myself getting into that. And I'm like, you're in your 40s. I don't. It's about weird to be saying, "Oh, this is the industry that I kind of want to get into someday." Like, you should at least be kind of in the process of it, if not, like at that point. But
she believes, Pete. She has faith.
And then she says, "Do you like Shania Twain?" And Scott's like, "Yeah, sure." And then she sings a sort of Christmas version of Man, I Feel Like a Woman, where all the lyrics are changed to Christmassy things. But she doesn't just sing it to him quietly, like, so he can hear it. She stands up in the restaurant and starts actually performing for like, everyone's looking at her. He's feeling uncomfortable. And do you know what? I'll give the character some credit here, because when she sits down after she's done and she's like, "What, you didn't like that?" He's very honest and just says, "It's a lot to take in. I'm kind of shocked that you just did that."
He's kind about it. He's not rude.
He's not rude. He doesn't say it was terrible or that it was embarrassing. He just says, "I did not expect you to make a scene, effectively." And it's, and she just gets in a mood. It's like, well, if you don't appreciate that I put myself out there for you by doing that, then there's no point in continuing this dinner. And she just storms out.
So that role was played by Molly Shannon, who I think her best known role is Superstar. It's a comedy movie, came out in the very late 90s. So she was kind of a big comedy actress as this movie came out. So definitely well known. But it was definitely, I think she was big on either Mad TV or SNL. I can't remember which one she came from. But yeah, I thought that this scene was good. But it definitely, I thought that we were going to go on a couple of blind dates, because I guess that was in my head for some reason of previous watches. The fact that this was the only one, I was like simultaneously thinking, yeah, I can see why we're not going on any more blind dates. And also thinking, well, what are the odds that the second one's still going to be that crazy?
Yeah, I mean, because for a second it's like, oh, this is perfect. She loves Christmas. I'm Santa Claus. Like, like she's going to love me.
He's sitting there thinking, pulling out the Barry Allen Flash thing right away, just being like, "Hey, by the way, it's me. I'm the guy.
I'm Santa Claus, baby." You've been very nice,
or very naughty, depending on how you want.
So, yeah, I mean, very quickly, like, the kid gets caught graffitiing again, and he's going to get suspended. But Tim Allen talks her into, how about just community service? So she runs like a community thing at the weekend for all the kids to show up, all the ones that are in trouble, to help clean the neighborhood, or wash the graffiti off the walls.
Center.
Yeah. So, but it's when they're together there that like someone's giving her shit, and like he joins in and like helping her out, and then all these kids are drawn to him to like tell them what they want for Christmas. And
I think it's just the one girl.
No, it's a cuniforms.
No, that was in the first movie when he was on the park bench at the soccer thing. This is just the one girl, Pamela.
I could have sworn I Q-formed behind her afterwards.
Nope.
Maybe I'm conflating the two scenes, but fair enough. But anyway, she's impressed. She's like, "Oh, that's really sweet. The kid came to talk to you." Stuff like that. It's like, "But how do you know your name?" It's like, "Oh, her necklace had her name on it." It's like, oh, I guess I missed that, kind of thing.
And that's the first scene, because we've been skipping over the duplicate Santa plot for now, but that is the first scene where he has to use up some of his magic.
Yes.
So we see the watch tick down to 9 units.
Yeah. And then he uses a shit ton of it. Because
like all in one night he uses the rest of it.
Because this is the thing, like he basically, after this, like, does he go straight to her house like, that night or the next night?
I feel like it has to be, because unlike the first movie, which took place over a year and didn't feel like it, this took place over like 3 weeks and still doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, it's the opposite.
It feels like it took place over, like, you say the opposite, I feel like it took place over like 4 days. I don't think this took place longer than 27 days. I feel like it took place over, like, he got there at the beginning of the week, and by the end of the week, we're here.
That's kind of what I meant. I don't know why I said the opposite, but you know what I mean. Regardless. So, like, he goes to her house, like, she opens the door, and it's like, oh, he's already, like, completely into her now, right? Mm-hmm. And it almost feels like the movie kind of, like, I don't know, almost like it skipped over a scene where, like, he has this realization to me. Like, it felt like he would just jump to it. But he goes to her, and he's like, oh, I was going to ask you if you wanted to go get some noodles, or maybe some pie. And then she's like, that's your idea of a night out? And he's like, well, I don't know, what do you want to do? He's like, oh, a pizza maybe? A movie?
And then they bond over, like, the type of pizza, the movie they watch, and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, they bond a little bit, but she's already kind of dressed up, and he's like, oh, where are you going? And it's like, oh, I'm going to this, it's the Christmas staff party. Which, by the way, there was a tree at this staff party, and I couldn't help but wonder, like, did this not fall under the not having Christmas decorations at the school, or...
Time continuum.
Yeah. It's just a thought. But he's like, hey, I'll take you there. And she's like, yeah, well, that's great, but I kind of need to come home eventually. He's like, well, okay, I'll come back and pick you up. He's like, how about you just stay? You go with me. And he's like, all right then. And then we cut to, like, well, we don't cut to, sorry, there's another thing to get to, but when we actually get to the party, it's the most depressing, quiet party, to the point where she after, like, just some awkward moments of silence where they're just sipping their drink, she goes, I owe you one. And then he goes, don't be crazy, this is a great party, that guy just moved.
I thought that there were I think that this one scene, the Christmas party, taken individually and separately, has a good heartwarming feel to it. It doesn't particularly have a message or anything, but it is just a good little cutout of, like, here's why it's a nice little Christmas movie. You add in all the extra stuff, it gets a little bit hazy, but this one scene is just a nice little snapshot of, no, this is a good way to spread Christmas joy and whatnot.
It doesn't really have a message, but it does, like, advance the plot in that it's all about kind of, like, making her kind of, like, see the side of him and falling for him kind of thing. Obviously, though, the ride itself, even though he arrived there, I think, in a car, I think you see him pull up. When he opens the door, it's the sleigh and a couple of reindeer. And like that's the ride that he's going to give her is in this, and this uses, like, half of his magic that he's got left. It just ticks down, and then he even uses a little bit more, so it snows over the top of them at the right moment. When it's like, just to make the moment perfect.
And this entire scene, though, is her getting out, basically her gremlin story. Not nearly as grotesque, but it's her gremlin story of just like, well, I believed in Santa with all my heart, and I would fight kids at school who said otherwise, and one day I came home with a bloody nose, and my parents told me the truth, and I never believed in anything again.
And she says what some of her presents were growing up that she cared about from Santa. And this all comes back because to liven up the party, Tim Allen gets on the stage and basically says, oh, hey, there's a Secret Santa thing happening here. Yeah, so, and, Carol's like, there's no these presents under the tree are fake. They're just for show because the carolers are coming later. And he's like, no, there's another sack of presents backstage. He's like, what are you talking about? Those not. And then he pulls out his sack, and this is basically what's used the rest of his magic.
Can we rephrase that a little bit? Like, he pulls out his sack.
You know what? He reveals his sack.
Oh, much better. Okay.
He presents his sack.
Yep.
He unleashes.
He gets up on stage and shows everyone his sack, full to the brim, ready to burst.
He unleashes his sack. He ushers in his sack, and so he brings out the sack of presents, and he's basically like, "Hey, this is for so and so," and so he actually names someone, and that person comes up and he opens the present, and it's like a game or toy that he liked as a kid, right? And then a second person does it, and it's basically everyone gets something they cared about as a child, And it's like, no one could have known about this. How did they do this? And she, Carol's watching this being like, this is wild. What's going on? And then after, like, so at the end of the scene, you see like him walking through the room and like everyone's playing games with each other. The party's now this brimming with life. Everyone's happy. And he hands her a present, and it's like the doll that she really liked as a kid, this baby doll thing. Right. And she's like, but I told you this about an hour ago. How could you possibly have done this? This is ridiculous.
And his reasoning is literally just, don't think about it. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah, just go with it. So they end up out in the hall, and she's like, smitten with him at this point. And she kisses him on the cheek to thank him for doing all this. And then she's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was too much. And he's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. And then they're going to get a smooch, and then magically mistletoe appears over the top of them. And she looks up and sees it and goes, where'd that come from?
And then he pulls out his sack.
Well, then he looks at his watch again, and I think that was his last bit of magic, was the...
Yeah, he was either down to 0 or 1. I'm not sure which at that point.
So but that's basically it. Like, he's done. But what's funny though is the next time you see them together, they're like at her place and they're just kind of like joking like a couple, and like she's lying on the couch and they're very relaxed. And this is when like Charlie sees that he's there, and like these friends are like, "Wait, is your dad dating the principal? Ew.
Gross, dude." Ugh.
I mean, yeah, Elizabeth Mitchell, what a horrid creature to be shacking up with.
I mean, to be fair, for a bunch of what seem to be middle schoolers who view her apparently as Satan, it is kind of something that's worth ridicule.
Yeah, right. If I had a teacher like that at that age, there's no way I wasn't thinking she was hot.
But she hates Christmas, Pete. Come on.
That just makes her naughty, which makes her all the more enticing.
Okay. Fair enough.
That's all I'm saying. I do not buy for a second that all these, maybe the girl, but all the young boys, there's no way in hell they all think she's hideous. I'm just...
It's not that they think she's hideous, it's that they think she's a hard ass, and that she is completely unrelenting in her rage and fury, which, going back to the earlier scene, a guy is caught skating in the halls, and she's like, look into my eyes. What do you feel?
Oh,
that's they're cold and dark. And that's your future, Tim.
I did like that scene, actually. I like this scene because, like, this kid plays it completely straight. He's not trying to, like, add a comic twist to it. He just very seriously looks into her eyes and goes, they're cold and dark. And she's like, well, that's what's waiting for you if I have to catch you again. Kind of thing. I'm like, oh, jeez.
Like, that scene alone struck me enough of being like, yeah, no, she doesn't mess around. This is someone who, if you get on the bad side of, you're not going to come back. But again, as the story progresses, you see that it's more of just a front she puts up for the students rather than someone that she is otherwise.
Yeah. Do you think this might be like a parallel between her and like the robot Santa, who's like getting strict and more strict?
Do I think there's an intentional parallel? No. Do I think they might have accidentally stumbled upon something? Maybe.
I could almost buy it was intentional, but it was like more of a thing in like a previous draft that got whittled down to the point where it just feels...
the Toy Santa thing was all about following the rules and not allowing any leeway, which I could see her character doing, but it was never quite that. It was more so of just, hey, Charlie, you kind of seem like you're troubled. Like, it wasn't that she was like getting kids for, gum chewing or wearing hats or something, anything like small. It was all just like, no, you literally like graffitied an entire wall. That's against the rules anywhere, kid.
Like, I know I'm asking for trouble by doing this, but dare I propose that a fitting end for her arc, so that she actually has a character arc herself. I mean, she kind of does, but like one that's more personal to her. Yeah. It would be that when they're confronting Robot Santa in the North Pole towards the end of the film, like maybe she could grill Robot Santa out, and kind of it would be like this sort of learning thing where she says, no, you can't be this much of a hard ass on the elves, because like you have to give them some leeway so that they enjoy this time of year. They have to enjoy what they're like. You could have like had her learn a lesson about how she is with the kids by recognizing it in the Robot Santa and concluding an arc, which would make her feel like she's more important in the final part of the movie, other than just being the new bride that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a problem, that she doesn't feel important, like, at all by the time we hit the end. But I think the only way to manage that is if you had her again rewritten to really be a stickler on the rules and then just slowly ease up over time, and then have a whole subplot in Robot Santa where it's like their final confrontation would be her pointing out how these rules he's enforced are like somehow contradictory, and thus causing his little robot brain to explode because he's like, must follow the rules, cannot follow rules at the same time. Paradox explosion. That's about the only way I could see that working.
The old Kirk method, yes.
Yeah.
No, I feel like, and we did this a little bit with the first one as well, but there's definitely like the material here to be like, I can see the better script. I can see what the better script could be with just a few changes and like making things like, I mean, we were critiquing the first chunk of this movie for setting up a lot of things that it has no intention of paying off. Or maybe it did and they just get cut out of the movie. Like, that's entirely possible.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's what it is that I think there was a draft of this script where 90% of the movie's focus was just on the romantic interest and Charlie's problems as like a student. And then after rewrite, at some point, maybe like a studio head or someone came in and said, you guys need to show what's happening at the North Pole. We want the magic and whimsy. We need the North Pole section. And they added in this whole toy Santa plot, which again, we will get to, but that's the part that I think felt like the add-on. I think that the stuff that had more things that could be elaborated on was the stuff that Tim Allen as Scott Calvin was doing down in, where were they, Illinois, I guess, last time?
I don't even remember, but it's a shame because that's the stuff that would improve the character stories and the character arcs and make the things have more payoff. And I'm not saying it's like, I'm not expecting like Better Call Saul levels of character arc and drama, but you can have like a Christmassy film that has good character arcs and where the arcs make sense and they're more fulfilling as a result. So there's definitely lacking some of that in the way it does things.
I think that that's a change that was made with the age lowering again. I think that when they originally had it be, and again, this is assuming that it was that way to begin with, had it be the focus on the romance and the family aspect of it and him, trying to find love for 90 minutes rather than trying to find love for 45 minutes. And then, oh, hey, what about this crazy toy Santa up it? He's causing all this mischief and stuff. Boy, kids, don't you like all the craziness up there? That's what brings down the age rating significantly.
Yeah. I'm leaving all that stuff intentionally to the end because it just it makes us talk about it separately. For some reason, so he's in this scene. So we're still in this scene where the kids were snowballing the house, and Calvin's in there with her, and they seem quite happy. They're acting quite coupley. And then he tries to tell her he's Santa Claus, and she's like, "You're making fun of me. This is bullshit. How dare you?"
I mean, to be fair, I think they are only like 2 or 3 days out at this point. Like, it is extremely clear. He has to do this now. It has to happen. Yeah,
so he's telling her that he's Santa Claus, and I'm like, why not like take her and show her like the reindeer you've got in the back garden and say, okay, now that you've seen something that might help prove what I'm about to say, now I'm going to tell you. Like, but he just brings it up in the living room, and I'm like, why would you're not just showing her like? Maybe if you'd left one bit of magic left for you to...
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. I think that this story, I think it perfectly limited down, like, no, he had to hit 0 magic at this point, because if he were actually able to do anything, because what finally ends up convincing her that Santa, like, he really is Santa in the movie, is the most lackluster thing imaginable. It's just the snow globe lights up and shows things.
Hey, it's more than what the ex-wife and Judge Reinhold got in the last movie.
Fair enough. But no, it is, I think that if he had any magic at all, that he was able to literally just like direct her eyes towards and say, hey, watch this. And then he, makes presents appear out of nowhere. That would be enough to cause it. So he specifically had to not have enough magic in order to make it so we get the, oh no, he's making fun of me, so we can't be together, but somehow we'll still end up together.
Well, actually, I think one of the most undercooked things in this movie is Charlie's decision to go and like sort of fight on or his dad's behalf. He's already been back to the North Pole to deal with the other thing, and he goes to see her and says, "Hey, I'm going to talk." Which actually, so on Charlie, right? So Charlie has like a sort of like moment of honesty with Calvin where he finally says why he's like acting out and doing what he does, and it's the most unbelievable thing I have ever heard come out of like a 14-year-old in my life. Like
14-year-old, yes, I will agree with the age being wrong here.
Yeah. Oh no, if he was younger, I could maybe buy it, right?
Yeah.
But I cannot think of anyone over the age of say 12 who would be upset that they couldn't tell everyone what their dad does for a living. Like, you do the most amazing thing of all, and I can't tell anyone. All these other kids are talking about what their dads do, and I'm like, are they? Are they really talking about it that much?
Okay, so reframing it slightly, I think that it's less so more that he's like unable to participate in these imaginary campfire stories where everyone's talking about how cool their dads are. I don't think that's actually happening. I think he just used that as the opening argument to get into the more core of the story of like, he essentially knows that Superman is his dad, and yet he is unable to tell anybody. Like, it's more so not that I want to share my dad is awesome. It's more so that I have this incredible secret and it eats at me all the time. Like, I need to share this with someone. I think that's more so what it is.
And he ultimately shares it with his sister, which I actually did kind of like this running plot where the sister kept being like, is Uncle Calvin, is he Santa Claus? Like, and what makes you say that? You've got a reindeer. Tons of people have reindeer.
Name 5. They're all from Finland and I can't pronounce their names.
And then, you know, she asked the brother later, and then eventually when the brother like chooses to bring her down and sort of show, hey, it is like my dad is Santa Claus, you know, whatever. Like, you know, actually, honestly,
it is worth noting that the little girl is the one who makes Charlie's plot go into overdrive pretty much, where he has the fight with Scott. And then I think it's literally the next scene. The little girl, Lucy, is like, are you mad at Uncle Scott? And it's like, yeah, I am. Well, don't be. Okay. And then he goes and fixes his relationship with the principal.
Yeah. Well, like, that's what I was getting at, is his decision to go and do that is so undercooked. It comes out of, like, not nowhere, but it might as well be nowhere because it's so rushed. It's not like he's saying, oh, my dad's upset because he's lonely, so I should go and fight for him, and like sort of, even though I don't like her personally, I should go and try and talk to her kind of thing. Right. It's not like that at all. It's literally just a sister going, don't be mad at him, he's your dad. And then she walks away.
Yep.
That said, though, I do think Lucy as a character is actually one of the more likable characters in the whole movie.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because she's so innocent and earnest, and her kind of trying to sleuth out that are like, she calls him uncle, which I guess is the best thing to call him. But like,
I was gonna say,
what do you call your half brother's birth dad that's not even related to you?
Technically, it would be mom's ex-husband,
but also half brother's dad.
Yeah, but I mean that's the same thing. I feel like mom's ex-husband is the closest. If you're going by blood, yeah, it would be my half-brother's dad. I'm sure there's no actual term for it, or if there is, it's stupid as hell, but
uncle seems reasonable. That's fine.
Uncle's just that catch-all for like, a friend of the family. That's all it is.
Yeah. So, you know, I think his progression, it feels like a lot of stuff got cut out. Whether it was cut out in the script, whether it was cut out in the edit, I don't know. But
I mean, you're right in that his plot is definitely the least amount, because I mean, if you just look at it, there's maybe like 6 scenes he's in. And I would say only 3 of them, the borderline puberty scene, the scene where he's being honest, and the Lucy scene, those are the only ones who don't directly relate to him getting his father and the principal together.
Yeah.
That's the only remnants of a plot being able to stand on its own, and they're shaky at best. So
yeah. So I guess this is where we shift over and talk about the toy Santa going rogue and deciding that everyone's naughty. Oh, which reminds me, there's a reference at the start which is aged very poorly. So
oh god.
Basically, little not Judy, whatever the new one is. She comes in and she's giving him cocoa, and he's like, "Okay, what's the bad news?" You give it, and we know that he's getting bad news about the Mrs. Claus thing. Like he needs to get a wife, but like this is separate bad news, and it's like, whenever you give me cocoa, it's to sugarcoat bad news. What's the bad news? And she hands him the naughty or nice list, and it's like, it's Charlie. and he goes, Charlie Sheen, but I thought he straightened everything out. And I'm like, oh, jeez, that's not aged well.
Nope. They hedged their bets and it didn't work.
Oh, he all I could think was winning. So, which is pretty old now at this point, actually. But
absolutely, yeah.
It was like, why wouldn't he think of his son Charlie first? Why would he think of a celebrity?
He could. There's no way that his little boy Charlie was on the naughty list. That's not even something that could have popped into his head.
I guess I don't know. It was a bit of a forced joke, and it's a forced joke that's aged very poorly. So
yeah, I mean, there aren't a lot of, at least that I noticed, pop culture references. That was one that really stuck out like a sore thumb, where it's like, oof, yeah, that maybe one that should have hit the editing floor. Yeah,
that was the only one really. Otherwise, it's mostly just self-contained humor, I would say. So they make this duplicate, who looks very sort of plastic and all that, and I'll give them credit. There's a jump cut in here that is quite funny, where like they're saying to Bernard, you have to like lie to the elves and like convince them that this is Santa, and he says, I will not lie to all the elves. Cut to him saying, and he's sensitive about the look, so whatever you do, elves, don't say the word plastic.
Yep. And I believe that's called the Gilligan cut, where it's like, I'm absolutely not gonna do it, and then immediately wipe to, hey, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah. So that's all fine and well. I think where I got a little chuckle out of this plot is where he actually he enlarges like the toy soldiers, so he's got an army. He and he even gets that outfit where he's got like a black beret on and he's got like a black outfit.
Yeah, he goes full dictator of the North Pole.
Yeah, and I'm like, damn, you're really going all out with this imagery here and him having an army. And he locks all the elves in like the workshop, and he's like, no, every child's getting coal because they've all done something bad. So he turns them into like a sort of prison work camp where he's making them like chisel coal instead of build toys or whatever. So
I think that my favorite moment in this plot was his earliest scene, not the one where he comes out of the machine, but he sat down in Santa's office, and he has some of Santa's memories apparently, but he doesn't know basic things like how to eat or drink, which I never understood that in amnesia plots of like how much actually gets lost here. But in terms of this movie, like they present him with a thing of hot cocoa, and they're like, all right, careful, it's very hot. And Curtis is just off screen, like showing him like, just do this, lifting up the glass to his mouth. And then Santa just downs the whole thing all at once, scalding his body. But he immediately is, I mean, they literally quote it here. It's like, I think that cocoa gave me a bit of a buzz. Like, he is off and ready. And I think that Tim Allen had a lot of fun doing this particular part.
I think his performance in general in this part is, like this role, is where he got to probably do the most weird stuff and have just fun, just being wacky with it. Because he's sort doing this thing where he's constantly smelling this fake smile, and he's constantly sort of like chomping his mouth in a weird way as he talks. It feels like this is like, okay, he's getting to just let loose here and just go run with this concept and idea. And there's the odd little moment that's kind of amusing where he'll sort of say ho ho too many times, and Bernard's like, cool it on the ho ho ho's. So then he says ho 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 again, but he sort of emphasizes only one of them. So he's like ho 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 ho, like, and just sort of stuff like that.
And at one point, because I did promise I would bring it up, they tell him like, hey, you aren't allowed to touch the naughty and nice list. And in order to try to distract him, they tell him, hey, why don't you go play football with the elves? And he decimates them. He destroys these poor little children out on the football field. It is horrifying and yet so enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, so he's going full dictator, and Tim Allen gets back with the Tooth Fairy, and the Tooth Fairy he flies back quick because obviously he's going to reappear with more passengers very soon
later on. Yeah,
because it's not even that long after Tim Allen arrives, but he's running around with Curtis, and they're trying to deal with things and sort things out. But the big sort of save is we see so a callback to the first scene we had with Charlie, where he had like the grapple, and he's sort of like going down into through the roof. He does that here in the North Pole. He comes down through the skylight to help, because he's tied up at this point. The robot Santa's tied him up, because the robot Santa is taking the sleigh. He's going to deliver coal to everyone. It's Christmas Eve, and then it's just after he's leaving. Well, I think he's not technically left yet. I think when they untie Tim Allen, they like run into the garage, and he's just taken off. So they just sort of miss him at that point,
like by 2 seconds max.
Yeah. But
I do want to point out though that real quick, they bring up Charlie and the principal.
Yes,
Carol. They bring them both up via the Tooth Fairy. And they have this weird little, I wouldn't even call it a plot, but just like this weird little thing where they keep on pointing out that they used one of Charlie's teeth, which those are definitely like adult teeth.
Oh, yeah,
those are not,
by this age, sure.
Like, they ripped out just an adult tooth, and he's just like, yeah, don't worry about it, Dad. But like, not to get too much behind the camera here, I had some teeth taken out like a couple weeks ago. He would not be able to stand. He is down on the ground right now. Either that, or he is drugged out of his mind.
It's magic. That's all.
Yeah, no. I, to be fair, Tooth Fairy probably would be able to do something, being the Tooth Fairy and all. But I like how, fast forward to the end of the movie, as soon as they tie the knot up at the North Pole, they just cut over to Charlie, and he feels his mouth, and then the tooth is back.
Magic.
All of a sudden. Yeah, why not?
Absolute magic.
Sure. Clock strikes midnight, you get your teeth back if you're at the North Pole. That makes sense.
Yeah, so obviously Tim Allen has to ride all the reindeer with the sleigh, except the reindeer in training. All the... What was it? Chet. There you go. So we get this awful, and it really is bad, like it's all just this green screen stuff of him riding a reindeer alongside the robot Santa in the sleigh, and it just all looks like shit. Like, it looks terrible.
Yeah, and it's also doing that thing where, they're both Tim Allen, so you never, I mean, not never, you very infrequently see both of them on screen at once. They can't keep on making it a two-shot where it's like, oh, Santa's here, and Tim Allen's there, and they're fighting each other, but we'll never actually see them on screen fighting each other.
Yep. But of course, ultimately, Tim Allen's able to like climb into the sleigh and take control. Or
I do want to point out there was one call to Tim Allen's career in Toy Story. They had the toy robot say, "You are a sad, strange little man," which is a quote from Buzz Lightyear.
Okay.
In Toy Story.
I didn't catch that. Nice little reference.
Yep.
So. Yeah. Meanwhile, the elves and Charlie are throwing snowballs at the toy soldiers, which is enough to.
I mean, it gets into a full-on like riot. Like, they're going around town dumping more tinsel and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely the least effective out of everything going on.
It's one of these things that always is a problem with these sort of kids movies, is that your big climax, because it's not an action director directing it, right? Because it's otherwise a lighthearted kids movie, is that the actual big set piece at the end where you have something like this isn't actually ever that entertaining. It all just kind of blends together in my mind, and there's not much to really talk about.
I mean, I have like tons of notes on just the individual setup scenes, but by the time it gets down to there, I think I have like one line saying like, big fight scene doesn't look good.
Yeah, there's not much to really say. I mean, it's far more interesting to get to the part afterwards where, okay, everything's fine, I've got my Santa outfit back on, I need to go deliver all these toys, and then someone's like, "Psst, Santa, what about the whole wife thing?" Is it,
what about that whole plot we nearly wrote out of the movie? Come on.
Oh, yeah, so I kind of need to, like, get married, or I can't be Santa anymore, and, like, this is the thing, like, I get, this is not obviously his decision, but, like, what is she supposed to say when he says, if I don't get a wife before midnight, then there'll be no Christmas and no kids will get any toys and they'll all stop believing?
I mean, to be fair, that was the exact same reasoning they used to make him Santa in the last movie.
True. He is also a victim of this manipulative tactic. Yeah. But like, if she said no, she like people would villainize her. Like, you just ruined Christmas.
I would love to see the alternate cut of this movie where she says no, and then like it just fades to black, and then it fades back up, and there's a news reporter being like, millions of children are weeping across America.
And the elves as well. I can just imagine the elves all crying and like holding the
Yep.
unfinished toys in their hands, rocking back and forth.
Just ends on Ave Maria as the North Pole slowly fades to white.
But of course, she says yes when he eventually asks her properly. But
And I do want to point out that the when they are all tied up, like when Charlie arrives, they specifically say 19 minutes to Christmas. So all of this, the stopping Santa, taking out the wooden soldiers, proposing, getting married, happen in 19 minutes.
that's a lot to happen in 19 minutes, especially since they get in Mother Nature and they get all these people back in for the wedding.
Yeah, they put on wedding clothes for both her and him.
Yeah. And she actually asks, like, right before she agrees to it, she's like, is there a school here? The idea, like, is there something for me to do? Is like, yeah, well, they need a new teacher, actually.
Yeah, sure. Anyway,
And I'm like, what, are a bunch of the elves who are technically, like, 1,000 years old going to pretend to be idiot children so that she's got something to do?
I mean, I can imagine that a bunch of those elves probably don't know basic like math and literature. They only know carpentry.
That's entirely possible. So yeah, basically she's like, yeah, don't be too late, honey, and he rides off in the sleigh, and it's she's now the North Pole housewife effectively.
Yep. And there is a post, not post credits, but during credits scene showing her just in the Mrs. Claus attire, just having fun. So
and it looks like they've put a bit of either they've given her a really puffy outfit, or the idea is that she's also like puffed up to be like Mrs. Claus.
Don't know.
And she's like dancing to a song, and then there's another little tag with the toy Santa who'd have shrunk down to toy size, and he's like in a shop window.
Yep.
Sort of happily
matching one of those same toy Santas from the beginning of the movies. It's like, hey guys, dance like this. This is the best way to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't torture, right? It wasn't the worst thing ever to watch. It's definitely more kid focused. There's definitely some more silly stuff, and Comet like making himself comically fat on like chocolate, and then like making this weird like talking noise that Tim Allen can understand. Like.
In fairness, looking back on it now, that is kind of like Tim Allen's grunts that he does. That's probably why he could understand it.
To be fair, he didn't grunt himself in this movie, though. He did it once in the last movie, but he didn't do it in this. So
restraint, strange to see.
Yeah, because it happens every episode of Home Improvement, maybe multiple times per episode, and those are like 22 minutes once you take out the ads. So that's quite a difference. Quite a difference. But I think in sort of a summary, I'd say that it's much like the first movie, but it's even more guilty of it. Is that it feels like the script is kind of just gutted to get it down to 90 minutes, and it's missing some extra layers that it could have. And that's not, again, I'm not saying that you have to make it a serious movie. I'm saying that in its own tone and its own lighthearted realm, it could still be a better movie with a better script and more fulfilling character arcs and plot points that pay off. As it is, it's perfectly watchable. I mean, I'm never going to watch it again, but it was perfectly watchable.
Right. Yeah. No. I honestly, I'd love to see some behind the scenes on this of like first draft, second draft, and just see at what point, if maybe it was at the beginning, maybe they did genuinely start with like the G rating and like wanting to make this more aimed towards kids than families. But I think that there was a point where this whole toy Santa subplot was added in. I don't think it was naturally, organically there from the beginning. They were just like, hey, why not make it so that something's going on at the North Pole while we're in the South? Because there is easily an entire climax where they're like racing against the clock to get married or something like that.
That's enough. That's absolutely enough. Is just to race against the clock to get married and get back to the North Pole so they can, get Christmas going. Like that would absolutely be enough. And I think, it's probably a studio note. Not so much that they wanted the movie to be more kiddie per se, although that's definitely how it's ended up. But I think it's just a case of, well, the first movie had like the Christmas at the start, the Christmas at the end, and there was all these magical things happening in both. I think maybe in the script writing phase, there was probably a note of like, there needs to be more like Christmassy magic stuff happening, and that's where okay, we have to have this subplot there at the North Pole, so there's always this stuff to cut back to.
Yeah, because I imagine that whole you have a limited amount of magic thing was probably around from the beginning to add that extra bit of tension as well. And that would easily make it a thing of like, we are not going to make a sequel to this magical heartfelt film where we're not doing any magic. We need to have that around. So that was probably a studio note at some point. But
it's also a bit weird to me that they kind of waste this idea of a council of all these mythical characters like getting together. That almost feels like it could be the setup for a whole sequel. As just,
I mean, there is a third one that's now involving Jack Frost,
true.
So they could all be coming back.
Seems like he's the arch nemesis of Santa, based on the poster.
I mean, this is the one I haven't seen either, so I don't know what's getting into it.
I really don't know myself.
Based off the name, if I had to assume the plot, I think that it's Santa wants to leave the job and Jack Frost like tricks him into doing it so that he then becomes Santa. That's my guess.
And he's going to
mess it all up.
Do it poorly, intentionally, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say about Santa Claus 2. Although we've actually we're at like 85 minutes somehow, so clearly we had enough to talk about. So David, why don't you rate Santa Claus 2 out of 10?
All right. So yeah, I definitely went into this with more nostalgia, I think, more so than anything else, and trying to be objective, trying to sit down and watch it. It definitely doesn't live up to my memories of it, which I don't think it ever could. Because, as a kid, it's just like, look at the funny stuff. It's not bad. It's not a horribly made film. It doesn't have anything that's like a bad moral for kids or a bad Christmas message or anything like that. It's just kind of by the numbers and a little bit soulless in a lot of ways, where I really praise the first one for having that really heartwarming message. It just had that feeling of it of like, no, here's a guy and his kid, and it like really all comes together. This one just felt like, hey, here's some adventures Santa got up to since you last saw him. Like, it doesn't feel like there's anything else there. So if I had to rate it out of 10, I think that this one is a 5.5. And the only reason I put it above just that center median mark of 5 is that it is still fun. It has some moments to it. While it does look cheap, and that definitely takes away from it, it does still have a certain just, I don't want to say timelessness, but a certain, it's a fun movie to watch. It's not taking itself too seriously. It's not doing anything that's too over the top stupid. It's just hey, here's something for the kids this time. Why not?
Yeah. Which is interesting because what kids love is a good romance plot.
Which is why I think it was so toned down. That's what I'm saying. Is this a romance plot in the same way that, like, I don't even know, like how the first movie, as we compared, was the Kafka-esque transformation, where it's like, yeah, technically you could say it's a romance, but it's more so just of necessity.
Yeah, I don't know what you're expecting from me, but I think I'm actually going to agree with that and say 5.5 as well.
Yeah,
it's just, it's just over the line in that it's likable enough. There's the odd joke that works. There's definitely some kiddie stuff that doesn't. And there's definitely a bunch of things we can sit and, break apart the script and say, oh, this is all the things that it's kind of doing incorrectly in some way. But, yeah, it's not a painful experience. So, and is even kind of likable at times, and that's about as positive as I'm willing to be. So,
kind of likable at times. Put it on the box.
So there you go. That's Santa Claus 2. Our joint rating, though, which is does it make the cut?
Okay. I know I have to lead this off. If I try to throw it to you, you're going to throw it back at me. So I'll just go ahead and say I'm not super attached to it, but I do think that this cuts it close. I think that it is still worth having around in the sense of like a holiday film collection, but it definitely is nowhere near the quality of the last one.
So you want to do cut it close?
Yes. and don't push me because I will fall very easily.
I don't know if a 5.5, not that the number rating's always necessarily going to correlate with what I'm going to say with the next bit, but I don't know if this is something that I would say is cutting it close. I might say cut from the collection, and that it's not worth having. Not that it's not worth watching, but not worth having.
Fair enough. If we're talking about purchasing, if someone went out of their way and said, I'm going to buy the Santa Claus 2, I'd be like,
why?
You sure you don't want to just rent that? You sure you don't want to have that? That's fair enough. If we're viewing it through that. But I do think that in terms of holiday films, you can do a hell of a lot worse. I think that this is still pretty up there in terms of a nice feeling story holiday-wise.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning as well. Not that I think we should consider this when we're making this choice, but I'll just add on as an additional point is that with something like this is always going to be on Disney Plus. It's always going to be there. So
absolutely.
At that point, I'm like, don't buy Santa Claus 2, you fool. So there you go. That's just thoughts on the Santa Claus 2. Which obviously leaves the third one to go, and also it might have already been up by now. It probably has. Our bonus episode, Christmas with the Cranks, over on Patreon.
Yep.
Which all patrons from $2 and up will get access to. So make sure you go and have a look if you're interested in that, and it also helps support the show and support all the content that we can make on Mail Fuzz Movies and Mail Fuzz TV, where we have the Collector's Cut, where we go through franchises and movies, but we also have the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is the sci-fi movie podcast, and Screams After Midnight, which is the horror movie podcast. So check those out if you haven't already. But other than that, though, I will tell you to like and subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. Those things help us out a lot as well. They help spread the word. You can get us at Streams Midnight on Twitter. And of course, rate us highly on your podcast app. If you're on iTunes, give us 5 stars and a nice review. That helps us out too. All those things are very useful and help the show continue along and grow and find more people, all of which is greatly appreciated.
I'm on the verge of quitting right now if we don't get some more 5-star ratings. So,
but that's basically it. So obviously this is a shorter series for December. This little Christmas trilogy, and as we're recording this a bit in advance, so we're actually recording this like a day before we'll know what the vote winner is. But by the time this goes out, I'm sure it'll be heavily announced. So look forward to the next January's selection of movies.
We will officially announce it next episode.
Yes. So thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and are you naughty? Are you nice? Tough tits, you get a lump of coal anyway.